Hi, my name is Chloe. I'm 19 years old. Lately, my family and I had been searching for a new home. We absolutely needed to move closer to my father Mark's workplace. We didn't want him wasting hours in the city's endless traffic. However, every house near his office was either occupied or incredibly expensive. After weeks of searching, my mother Sarah found a listing. The house was tucked away in the woods, just a 5-minute drive from my father's office, in a quiet and peaceful neighborhood. Moreover, these were luxurious 2-story craftsman-style detached homes. My father said skeptically, "Sarah, don't be ridiculous. A detached duplex. We need something much more affordable." When my mother mentioned the price, my father's eyes nearly popped out of his head. "No way. Maybe that's the weekly rate. It can't possibly be that cheap per month," he argued. But my mother was sure. "Call and see for yourself. I have the number right here." My father grabbed the phone immediately. When the woman on the other end confirmed the price was correct, he excitedly said, "Great, we'll be there tomorrow." We set off early the next morning. When we arrived at the address, nestled among towering pine trees, we realized how lucky we were to find such a serene place. We signed the contract with the landlord, Mrs. Higgins, and moved in that same day. Since the house was already furnished, we only brought our personal belongings and my father's office equipment. I immediately went to the second floor and picked a room. With a stunning view, Mrs. Higgins lived in the house right across from ours. She mentioned she had a son my age named Ethan and was eager for us to meet. My mom politely replied, "We'll drop by as soon as we're settled." We spent the entire day handling chores and settling in. Finally, we sat down for a nice dinner in our new home. We had just started when there was a sudden knock at the door. My father, Mark, got up to check it. We waited for a few seconds, but he didn't return. My mother, Sarah, stood up and went after him. Frankly, I couldn't resist and followed her too. When we reached the door, we found my father and our landlord, Mrs. Higgins, chatting quite intimately. My mother asked in a firm, decisive tone, "Good evening, Mrs. Higgins. Was there something you needed?" She simply smiled and said, "Oh, nothing at all. I just stopped by to see if you needed anything. Mark is such a charming and friendly man. I'm truly happy I rented this house to you. If you need anything, don't hesitate to call. Mark already has my number." She gave my mother a brief, cold look before turning away into the night. As my father closed the door, my mother looked annoyed. "You took her number?" she snapped. My father replied, "Don't be ridiculous. Sarah, we talked while arranging the lease." That's what she means. What was I supposed to do? He walked toward the living room, but she followed him. "What were you two talking about for so long? Why were you being so friendly? Look, don't test my patience, or we'll move out as fast as we moved in." My father stopped abruptly and spoke in a heavy tone. "You're being paranoid. Sarah, I'm just trying to be polite because we should be grateful to have this place at such a price. I can't afford to be late for work. You know they've been looking for people to lay off lately. If I lose my job, who's going to pay the bills? Who's going to cover your expenses, your outings, the car payments, and Chloe's needs?" His tone was so sharp that my mother didn't say another word. She finally whispered, "Fine, let's just eat." But my father muttered, "I've lost my appetite. I'll be in my study," and walked away. My mother and I sat at the table, but she just stared into space. I said, "Mom, please eat something. You've worked so hard today. You can go talk to Dad in a bit and fix this. Let's not let our first night end like this." She sighed. "You're right, honey, but I'm just not hungry. You finish up. I'm going to talk to your father." And she left the table. After my mother left, I continued eating in silence. I was just about to clear the table when I was startled by shouting from upstairs. My father was yelling at my mother in a tone he had never used before. "You always do this, Sarah. You keep sticking your nose into my business and ruining my life. Why did you even enter my life? I wish you never had." I froze. Usually, my parents' arguments lasted 2 minutes at most before they made up. Hearing my father say such hurtful things broke my heart. As I headed for the stairs, I saw him rushing down. He slammed the front door so hard the whole house shook. He was gone. Then my mother's sobs filled the house. I ran upstairs and found her collapsed on her knees in the hallway. I hugged her, pleading, "Mom, please calm down." But she couldn't hear me through her pain. She eventually pushed me out of the room and locked the door, continuing to cry loudly. I retreated to my room, feeling helpless. Sitting by the window, I stared out at the dark woods. This house felt cursed. I wished this was all just a nightmare and I'd wake up to everything being normal again. Midnight came and my father still hadn't returned. My mother's room was finally silent. She had likely cried herself to sleep. The dinner table downstairs was still set, untouched. I looked out my window again. I had a clear view of Mrs. Higgins' yard and the window directly across from mine. A teenage boy was standing there, staring straight at me. This had to be Ethan, the son she mentioned. Even though I didn't know him, I already felt a surge of resentment toward him and his mother because of the way she had acted with my father. Ethan stood there motionlessly for a long time, watching me. Suddenly, I saw a dark shadow flash quickly behind him inside the room. As soon as the shadow vanished, Ethan's curtains snapped shut, not as if someone pulled them, but as if they closed on their own. My skin crawled. I whispered to myself, maybe it's just his mother, checking in because it's late and closing the curtains. I went back to bed, but sleep was impossible. No matter how much I tossed and turned, I couldn't drift off. Feeling suffocated, I went back to the window. Ethan was still there. It was so strange. He was standing perfectly still in the dead of night. As I watched closely, I saw that dark shadow flicker behind him once more. Even though the house was warm, a sudden, unnatural chill shivered through my bones. As dawn began to break, I heard noises from downstairs. Thinking my father had returned, I bolted out of bed. I rushed down the stairs and saw my father, Mark, in the kitchen. He was sitting at the table in the dark, eating frantically. I tried to flip the light switch, but nothing happened. The power must have been out. I walked toward the table. His head was down, and he was stuffing food into his mouth as if he were starving. "Dad, are you okay? Where have you been?" Mom cried so much. "Please don't do this to each other," I pleaded. He didn't even acknowledge me. Suddenly, he gagged and vomited everything onto the table. As I reached out to him, our eyes locked. His eyes were bloodshot, completely crimson. In the pale moonlight filtering through the window, I could see his face. He looked monstrous. Suddenly, he raised his hands and lunged at me. His fingernails had grown long and sharp, and blood seemed to be dripping from the tips. He pinned me down and began to choke me. I couldn't breathe. I tried to scream, but my throat was paralyzed. My eyes snapped shut, and when I opened them again, I was in my bed. My whole body was ice cold and trembling, hoping it was all just a nightmare. I stepped out of my room and went to my mother's door. Seeing it ajar gave me a brief sense of relief, but when I walked in, Sarah wasn't in her bed. I tried the light switch, still no power. My body began to shake with pure terror. I turned around, and there she was, standing right in front of me. My mother's face was a mask of pure horror. She was weeping and whispering to herself, "Mom, please talk to me. I can't take this anymore. I'm scared, the lights won't turn on and Dad isn't home yet." I cried out. She leaned in slowly and whispered into my ear, "There is no way out," before lunging at me. This time, I was fast enough to dodge her and bolted toward the stairs. She was screaming and laughing hysterically behind me. When I glanced back, I saw her crawling on all fours, sprinting toward me like an animal. I was screaming for help at the top of my lungs. Just as I reached the open front door to throw myself into the street, I woke up in my bed again. But this time, I didn't hesitate. I jumped out of bed and sprinted downstairs in seconds. Once I made it outside, I looked back at the house and burst into tears. It felt as if unseen eyes were watching me from every window. I was out, but I had nowhere to go, and dawn was still hours away. Gasping for air, I found myself walking toward Mrs. Higgins' house. I had just raised my hand to knock when the door swung open. Mrs. Higgins stood there. "Honey, what happened? Look at you. Why are you out at this hour?" she asked. Trembling, I replied, "My dad isn't home and my mom is... she's not feeling well. I had terrible nightmares and couldn't stay in the house. Can I stay here?" She hugged me tightly. "Of course, dear. Come inside." She led me to the living room and wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. Then she went to the kitchen, made a hot drink, and handed it to me. "You're pale as a ghost. What happened? Did your parents have a fight?" she probed. If I told her the truth, she might actually enjoy it. After all, she was partly to blame. So I lied. "No, my father just left early for work, and my mother was exhausted from the move and fell asleep. I think the first night in a new house just spooked me." Mrs. Higgins smiled thinly. "Don't worry, you can sleep here. I'll talk to your father and let him know you're safe with us," she said, turning away. Maybe my mother was right, I thought, but that wasn't the main issue right now. What truly mattered was why I was having such horrific nightmares and this strange warmth spreading through my chest. Between the hot drink and the safety of the blanket, I finally relaxed. I was so exhausted that the moment I leaned back, I drifted into a deep sleep. When I opened my eyes, the sun was up. It was morning. I folded the blanket, straightened my clothes, and headed for the front door. Just then, I heard Mrs. Higgins's voice from behind. "Honey, breakfast is ready. Where are you going?" "I assume my father is back and my mother is awake. I don't want them to worry when they don't see me at home," I replied. Mrs. Higgins said calmly, "Don't worry, your father hasn't returned yet. I spoke with him. Your mother will surely come here once she wakes up. Come, let's have breakfast. She came over and stroked my hair. What beautiful silken hair you have, she whispered, leading me to the kitchen. There were only 2 plates and 2 mugs on the table. Won't your son be joining us for breakfast? I asked. Mrs. Higgins replied, Ethan usually doesn't leave his room. He's always in there. He even eats his meals there. Don't worry about him, but you can meet him after we eat if you'd like. After breakfast, I offered to help her clean up, but she refused. She took me upstairs. When we reached Ethan's door, she leaned in and whispered, Let me tell you a little secret about Ethan. He's very friendly, but he's never had a girlfriend before. You'll be his first. By the way, he can't speak. Keep that in mind. Then, she opened the door, pushed me inside, and shut it behind me. Ethan was sitting in his wheelchair facing the window. I knew he wouldn't be able to answer, even if I spoke. I took a few steps forward and said, Hi, we just moved into the house across the street. I had breakfast with your mum. I actually spent half the night here. I wanted to see you because I saw you at the window last night, looking at my room. I thought maybe you'd want to be friends. My name is Chloe. But Ethan didn't move, nor did he utter a single word. I took another step closer. I took one more step. Now I was right beside him. I looked at Ethan closely, and I couldn't believe my eyes. His arms were strapped tightly to the wheelchair. His wrists were bruised purple. When I looked at his face, his eyes were blood red. His lips were parched and blue. Why are you like this? I whispered. Ethan suddenly opened his mouth to try and speak, but he had neither teeth nor a tongue. It was just a dark, hollow void. There were bright red marks on his throat like fingerprints. His hands and feet were also shackled to the chair. Terrified, I backed away and rushed to the door. Open the door! I screamed, but no one heard me. I pounded on the wood, crying for help. Gasping for air, I looked back at Ethan, and everything was normal again. He was sitting peacefully in his wheelchair. His face, eyes, hands, and feet looked perfectly healthy. No bruises, no redness. His eyes just stared at me blankly. I must have imagined it, I thought, but I felt like I was losing my mind. As I stood there in shock, staring at Ethan, the door swung open on its own. Without a second thought, I bolted out. I ran down the stairs and bumped into Mrs. Higgins. She looked strangely surprised. I'm sorry, I have to go, I blurted out and ran back to our house. When I got inside, I found my mother, Sarah, and my father, Mark, sitting together on the living room sofa. My father was wiping away her tears. I'm sorry, Sarah. My head was a mess last night. I didn't want to hurt you more, so I stayed with a friend, but I couldn't stay away. I have to head to work soon, he was saying. Seeing them reconciled felt like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I went over and hugged them both. I chose not to mention the horrific things I thought I'd seen. I didn't want to ruin the peace. My mother prepared a lovely breakfast. At the table, my father suddenly asked, Honey, I forgot to ask, where were you coming from this morning? I replied, I went to visit Ethan early this morning, Dad. He was watching me from his window last night, so I wanted to introduce myself. Mrs. Higgins made breakfast, so I grabbed a bite there. My mother's brow furrowed at the mention of Mrs. Higgins, but she stayed silent. After breakfast, my father showered, got dressed and said, I'm off to work, before leaving the house. We spent a quiet and pleasant day together. After finishing some chores, my mother Sarah said, Let's watch something together, and sat on the sofa. I lay down beside her, resting my head on her lap. As she stroked my hair, we watched a documentary. I felt incredibly fragile and exhausted from the events of the previous night and morning. Closing my eyes, I tried to catch some sleep. After a while, I felt her tugging at my hair quite roughly. She was whispering something rapidly, but the words were garbled and made no sense. I opened my eyes to say, Mom, please talk softly. I'm trying to sleep, but instead of my mother, I saw a hideous fur-covered creature with a distorted face. I bolted upright in terror. In that instant, I was looking at my mother again. She looked normal. What's wrong, honey? Why did you jump? Did you have a nightmare? She asked. Stuttering, I replied, No, everything is fine, and laid my head back on her lap to calm my racing heart. As she continued to pet me, whispering, My beautiful girl, my sweet girl, I closed my eyes again. Right at that moment, I heard my mother's voice coming from the kitchen. Chloe, I'm making some snacks. Do you want some? I froze, chilled to the bone. My mother's voice was coming from the kitchen and from right above my head at the same time. The voice of the entity stroking my hair suddenly changed, becoming guttural and terrifying. It grabbed a handful of my hair and began to pull violently as I struggled to get up, screaming, Stop! The figure vanished into thin air. Simultaneously, my mother came running from the kitchen. Chloe, what happened? Why did you scream? she asked. My hair was a mess and I was breathless. Without a word, I ran upstairs. In the bathroom, I looked in the mirror. I looked like a wreck. I realized then that these weren't just dreams. Something in this house was real, and it was haunting us. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to tell my mother everything, though I wasn't sure if she'd believe me. I gathered my courage, went back downstairs, and sat beside her. "Mom, I need to talk to you, but please, just listen to me until the end," I said. She took my hand and said, "Of course, sweetheart, I believe you. Tell me." So, I told her everything from the beginning, the horrors in Ethan's room and exactly what had just happened on the sofa. My mother touched my forehead with the back of her hand. "Chloe, are you all right? Maybe you're coming down with a fever. Or maybe these are just vivid nightmares," she said. "Mum, I just experienced something. I saw it, I felt it, I screamed," I insisted. She took a deep breath. "Listen, honey, I've never believed in the supernatural. Your father doesn't either. We are rational, logical people. There is an explanation for everything. Your psychology is likely shaken after the fight yesterday. Don't worry, it will pass," she explained. "Mom, can't you just say a prayer for me? Or maybe we should call a priest?" I asked. My mother shook her head. "Chloe, as I told you, we are secular people. We don't really have a connection to religion. Neither my family nor your father's ever taught us how to pray. We might believe in a higher power in a general sense, but it's just a private belief, not something we practice," she said. As she spoke, I thought to myself, maybe she's right. Maybe I'm just making this all up in my head. Everything was fine until evening, but as the sun went down, a familiar darkness began to cloud my mind. I was sitting in my room, watching the yard, when Ethan appeared at his window again. I felt so embarrassed after my breakdown this morning. The thought that he might think I was crazy bothered me. Instead of closing the curtain and hiding, I slowly raised my hand and waved at him. But the moment I waved, a sight of pure horror froze my blood. It wasn't just him. Suddenly, that hideous creature appeared behind him, grinning and waving back at me with a twisted hand. I snapped the curtain shut and backed away. My heart was pounding against my ribs. Seeing that face made my entire body turn to ice. I was terrified to go near the window again, but a voice inside me whispered that it wasn't real, that it was just a hallucination, and if I looked again, it would be gone. With trembling hands, I parted the curtain once more. Ethan was there alone. The space behind him was empty. Just as I took a deep breath to calm myself, the creature suddenly appeared right at my window. This time, there were only inches between us. I saw its terrifying grin and those hollow eyes from just a few centimeters away. I snapped the curtain shut and bolted toward the door. But as I reached for the handle, I felt the creature's presence right on the other side. Panicking, I backed away, running frantically back and forth in the room. The door was being forced from the outside. I scrambled under the bed, my tears flowing uncontrollably as my body turned to ice. The moment I hid, the noise stopped. Then, 3 slow knocks echoed. The door creaked open, and it stepped inside. I could see its hideous, twisted feet clearly. With every step it took, the very rhythm of the blood in my veins seemed to falter. The entity moved toward the window and stopped, its back to me, thinking I might escape unnoticed. I slowly crawled out from under the bed, but as I lifted my head, I witnessed my worst nightmare. Without moving its body, it snapped its head 180 degrees to look directly at me. Baring its jagged teeth, it hissed, "You can never leave." As it lunged, I scrambled out of the room. I reached the stairs, but it felt as if an invisible hand shoved me from behind. I lost my balance and tumbled down the flight of stairs, my body crashing against every step. I tried to scream, but I was voiceless. I heard the creature's heavy, rhythmic footsteps descending the stairs toward me. It paced around my broken body, leaning down to whisper in my ear, "You belong here now." I couldn't take it anymore and closed my eyes. Wishing for death, my soul felt trapped within the walls of that house. When I opened my eyes, my mother Sarah and my father Mark were by my side. I was in a hospital bed. After an examination, the doctor said, "She's fine, she just needs rest. You can take her home in a few hours." Once the doctor left, my mother stroked my hair. "Are you okay, honey?" she asked. "I'm fine, but how did I get here? What happened?" I asked. My mother hesitated for a moment before saying, "We'll explain everything. Don't worry." I spent the rest of the day lost in a sea of dark thoughts. I kept replaying that horrific sight and those relentless nightmares over and over in my mind. Occasionally, my mother Sarah would come to me and say, "Don't think about those things anymore. Everything is going to be fine." It was as if she already knew what I had been through. She was trying so hard to soothe me. When evening came, we left the hospital, but we didn't go back home. We drove to a hotel instead. Once inside the room, My mother immediately made a comfortable spot for me. She seemed to truly understand my pain. She kept asking, "Are you okay? Does it hurt?" Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Mom, stop asking those questions. Tell me what happened. Why are we in a hotel room? And what really went down in that house? Please, just tell me," I demanded. My mother and my father Mark exchanged a long look. My father nodded and said, "Go ahead. Sarah, tell her." My mother took a deep breath, looked me straight in the eyes and began, "Chloe, since the moment we moved in there, we all felt uneasy, but you were in a much worse state. You kept talking about nightmares and things that terrified you. To be honest, we noticed things too, but we couldn't find a reason. That last night, we started hearing noises, crashes, and strange whispers in the house that had no logical explanation. The only sensible thing to do was to call the police, because you weren't yourself anymore. You were talking to yourself and screaming uncontrollably." She swallowed hard and continued, "When the police arrived and saw us living in that house, they were completely shocked. They asked, 'Who rented this house to you? How did you even get here?' We told them about Mrs. Higgins living across the street and how she had leased the house to us. When they heard that, the officers looked at us in terror. They said, 'Ma'am, that's impossible. Both this house and the one across the street have been vacant for a very long time. We check these properties regularly because a few months ago, another family stayed here and experienced exactly what you're describing. They barely escaped with their lives. And just like you, they claimed a woman and her son lived in the house across the way.'" I could feel the tremor in my mother's voice as she continued. "The police told us that the woman living across the street killed her son, and then herself 2 years ago. Their bodies remained in the basement for an entire month. The truth only came out when neighbors complained about the stench. When the police entered, they were met with a scene of pure horror. The boy in the wheelchair had actually died long before the mother, likely poisoned by the things she fed him. Despite this, she couldn't accept his death and kept placing plates in front of him. But there was no food on those plates, only skinned animal remains and other unspeakable horrors." My mother looked at my father and swallowed hard. Ancient occult letters had been carved into the boy's skin with a knife, and the walls of his room were covered in drawings of eyes and ominous symbols. When the woman finally realized her son was truly gone, she hanged herself. But before she did, she committed the unthinkable. She tore out her own fingernails, cut off her tongue, and pulled out her teeth one by one. The autopsy revealed no drugs in her system. She had inflicted all that agony upon herself while fully conscious. Ever since they were buried, locals claimed to hear whispers and muffled screams echoing from those two graves. "We looked deeper into the story later, Chloe," my father chimed in. "We learned that the boy had been disabled since birth. The mother tried everything to cure him, but when medicine failed, she turned to dark rituals and the occult. Through these ceremonies, she would lure young people your age to that house, attempting to sacrifice them to entities from another realm. Her goal was to bargain for her son's recovery, hoping he would walk and breathe again. So Chloe, what you saw in that house wasn't just in your head. That house was a trap, waiting for its next sacrifice." My mother concluded her words. "The police told us, 'Thank God we got you out of there before it was too late. We need to monitor these properties much more closely from now on. I hope you are the last family to ever set foot in that cursed house.' After hearing that, we couldn't stay another second. We rushed you straight to the hospital. Sometimes we choose the easiest path just to make life simpler, but that choice almost cost us your life. You are alive and with us now, and that is all that matters." After my mother's confession, I was speechless. I finally knew the reason behind the nightmares and the unspeakable terror I had endured. Knowing that I hadn't lost my mind, that the horror was real, brought me a small sense of relief. Still, I couldn't help but wish it had never happened. Learning the truth can offer peace, but it isn't enough to erase the scars of such an experience. But what is meant to be will be. Sometimes, no matter what you do, you cannot stand in the way of fate. The important thing isn't falling into the darkness, but knowing how to find your way out. I learned this through a very bitter lesson. Life sometimes drags you into dark places you never expected. The real challenge is making it out alive. That's the end of the story, everyone. Thank you for listening. I love you all. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so and turn on notifications to stay updated on new mysteries. See you in the next video. Stay safe.